To be totally honest, when I signed up to take this class, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I'm a freshman, so Anthro 101 was a part of my FIG, and I kind of just signed up for it because I was signing up for a FIG. I sort of naively assumed that Anthro 101 would be a brief overview of different cultures, their backgrounds, beliefs, and comparing and contrasting different cultures and values. I was pretty shocked to hear that this whole course would be focusing on nuclear weapons, especially because I thought, why? What's important? What's the relevance? I was one of the people that Judd mentioned in the reading. I was a young social activist, or so I'd call myself. I was right alongside the March for Our Lives movement, the gay pride movements, but I had never really thought once or twice about nuclear weapons. Sure, I had heard it in the news in terms of North Korea and the United States, but I had never heard about the Marshallese Islands up until I took this course. That's why when I was reading Bravo for the Marshallese, I was so shocked to see that the United States had infiltrated almost every aspect of their culture with nuclear weapons. One thing that really stuck out to me when I was reading Bravo for the Marshallese was the Project 4.1 and how the United States could treat these humans as something besides people. The preliminary report was called the Study of Response of Human Beings Accidentally Exposed to Significant Fallout Radiation. Just given the title, how can someone be accidentally exposed to radiation? These Marshallese people thought they were being taken care of by doctors, but in reality they were guinea pigs. They were just being tested on, and they really didn't receive that much aid. Out of the 76 communities that were exposed to radiation, only 2 of them were declared worthy of receiving health and aid for all this awful stuff that they were exposed to. I mean, trying to think of these people and what they went through is something I can't even fathom. So many people that they knew or loved either died or was diagnosed with cancer. I remember when we were listening to the speakers come in, one of the ladies mentioned that everybody in the community knew someone who had cancer. My uncle has cancer, so imagining everybody going through that and some family members having multiple people that they loved being diagnosed with cancer is absolutely awful to think about because the United States caused it. Another aspect of culture that the bombs infiltrated was the importance of land to the community. Land is what ties the community together, gives people their purpose, and it was completely destroyed when the bombs went off by the United States. Not only that, but their food was tainted and poisoned with radiation. And when land gives the Marshallese people meaning in life, it was just taken out from under them. As the US, we didn't clean up. We simply dumped plutonium into a pit with cement and called it a day. And that's not even how we would treat our trash. That's how we treated a toxic item, because it was far away. And I think the Nader and Guster readings really summarized it. We externalized the harm. We looked at these people and we didn't really understand them, and we didn't try to clean up the mess. It was out of sight and out of mind. We labeled them as others because they were different from you or me, because they weren't American. We thought it was okay to take their land and test it for our benefits. Another way you can see how the nuclear weapons infiltrated their culture is through the language. Up until now, they didn't have words such as hospital, problem. These American and English words they use in their daily lives because they were exposed to nuclear weapons, and therefore they were exposed to American beliefs and words. The Marshallese people, when they were talking about what happened, they would always use we instead of I, which I thought was really interesting. We were hurt, we were bombed, we were attacked. This shows the strength in the community, but it also shows how these nuclear weapons just didn't affect one person. It affected everybody. It affected hundreds and thousands of people. And it's just awful to think that we thought it was okay to test our weapons on these people's lands, these people's homes. In addition, I think what was really painful to read about was the miscarriages and how those affected women. They had to use American words and English words to describe what they were seeing because these things that they were giving birth to were that. In their eyes, they weren't even humans. They were grapes or jellyfish. And when I was reading Bravo for the Marshallese and reading the testimonies, it was just so sickening and awful to think that these women thought it was their fault. That normally when you have a miscarriage in a really Christian community, it can be the sign of the devil or not being loyal. And that in a community that's normally so open and celebrates births and is all about togetherness, a lot of these women went through these miscarriages alone. Psychologically, it was a really big toll on them because they thought it was their fault. They didn't really realize that this is the radiation that we are exposed to and this is why it's happening. In their culture, it was a sin almost. And I just think it's really sad that these nuclear weapons, yes, they had the immediate effects. They immediately destroyed land and immediately exposed people to radiation, which therefore caused cancer. But they had long-term underlying effects that I feel like people wouldn't really assume right away. Cram's theory talks about acceptable exposure, and I think this part kind of made me angry when reading it. It's a term used by the United States essentially to cover up what they did. I mean, Radiation Man is a white male in prime condition in his 20s or 30s, and realistically, that can't be applied to women and men in the Marshallese Islands. They have different diets, they have different lifestyles, and yet that's what we were measuring to see if these people were exposed to an acceptable amount of radiation. I think when I was reading all these testimonies and all these different stories, it was pretty impactful, but I think what really made the difference for me was being able to tie a face to all these stories and listen to the Marshallese women come in and speak. I think it's really important to remember that while they were victims of the United States bombings, they are not just victims. They are fighters. And I mean, listening to these women talk about how they're going to make a change, how they're trying to help cure cancer was really empowering. And it really made me hopeful for the future of the Marshallese Islands. Because it's hard to seek treatment, as we learned about. Like, there are not very many sites for them to go and seek help. So it's really great to hear that these women are trying to make a difference. I think my biggest takeaway from this class is now I feel like I definitely am more knowledgeable about a subject I never really thought I would think twice of, to be honest. But most importantly, I definitely think this class has taught me how to empathize. I'd like to say I knew what empathy was before, but I think it's one thing to be able to read a book and really sympathize with the stories that you're reading. And not just sympathize, to try to understand what they're thinking about through an anthropological lens. Well, I don't agree that a miscarriage represents the devil or represents like a woman is unloyal. I can now understand why those Marshallese women at the time did. This course has taught me how to look at things with an unbiased opinion and not judge a culture from right from wrong. Instead, I am able to now look at it and see why those people believe what they do, whether I agree with it or not is something different. I really think I will take away just being able to understand people and that everyone's going through something, but that doesn't mean okay to treat people as less than what they are, humans.